It was New Year's Eve when everything fell apart. I thought the night would be just like every other, celebratory, full of optimism for the year ahead. My wife, Sarah, had a bright smile on her face as she handed me an envelope after dinner. The dim light of the Christmas tree reflected in her eyes, making her look almost ethereal. I didn't think twice when I tore open the envelope. Inside, a pregnancy test sat, its pink lines bold and unmistakable. I froze, my heart leaping in my chest. "Is this for real?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. Her smile widened. "Yes, we're going to be parents again," she whispered. I couldn't believe it. We had been trying for months, and now it seemed like our dream was finally coming true. I pulled her into my arms, overwhelmed by joy. A new chapter was starting. The future was ours. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. We celebrated, clinked glasses, and laughed with friends, but my mind kept returning to the tiny life growing inside her. I couldn't wait to share the news with everyone. The thought of becoming a father again, of watching Emily, our daughter, become a big sister, it was the happiest I had been in a long time. I kissed Sarah goodnight, and as I lay in bed that evening, I allowed myself to daydream about the future. The next few months would be full of anticipation, and soon, we'd be holding our baby in our arms. I closed my eyes, not knowing that in the span of just a few days, my world would shatter. A week later, I went for a routine checkup. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a simple visit to my doctor. I had been putting off a few tests for some time, so it was an all-encompassing physical. It wasn't until the results came in that I felt the floor drop out from beneath me. My doctor looked at me with a strange combination of sympathy and professionalism. "I'm afraid I have some difficult news," he began. "It appears you're infertile." The words rang in my ears, but I couldn't process them. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. I looked at him, waiting for the punchline. But there was none. He handed me a pamphlet on treatment options, but I couldn't focus. My mind was too busy reeling. How? Why had no one told me this before? My mind flashed back to that moment on New Year's Eve. The pregnancy test in Sarah's hand. The joy I had felt. It was all a lie. The words fell from my lips without thinking. "But I can't have children." The doctor hesitated, then spoke. "I'm afraid so. Your condition is genetic. There's no chance of reversal." I left the office in a daze. The drive home was a blur, but one thought pounded in my mind: Sarah's pregnancy. It wasn't mine. She had been with another man. The realization hit me like a freight train. The trust, the years we'd spent together, they were all meaningless. I had been living a lie. When I got home, I was numb. I went straight to the living room, sitting down on the couch with my head in my hands. The truth was clear now, but the rage hadn't yet come. That would come later. Sarah was in the kitchen, humming, completely unaware that her entire world was about to collapse. I couldn't even look at her. How could she betray me like this? How long had she known? And who was the man who had given her the baby that wasn't mine? There was no need to confront her immediately. I needed to think. I needed to plan. The storm was coming, but I would be the one to control it. And when it hit, it would destroy everything. I didn't say anything that evening. I went to bed beside Sarah, my back turned to her, and I lay awake in the darkness. My heart, my mind, and my soul were consumed by the bitter knowledge that the woman I had loved for over a decade had betrayed me in the most unforgivable way. Tomorrow, I would confront her. But today, I would savor the calm before the storm. I was no longer the man who had been celebrating the future. I was someone else now. Someone ready to take back control. And I would make sure she paid for what she'd done. The next morning, I woke up before Sarah, the weight of the situation heavy on my chest. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, calculating my next move. Confronting her now wouldn't give me the satisfaction I needed. I had to have proof, something irrefutable. She wouldn't get away with lying to me. I needed to watch her squirm, to see her face when the truth came crashing down. I decided to start with the most basic of steps, her phone. As she still slept, I slipped out of bed and quietly made my way to the kitchen. I grabbed a coffee mug, more out of habit than necessity, and glanced over at her phone charging on the counter. The temptation was overwhelming. I hesitated, but only for a moment. I had to know. With trembling fingers, I unlocked it. It wasn't that I didn't trust her, or maybe it was. But I needed clarity, and clarity didn't come from guessing. It came from truth. What I found took my breath away. The texts between Sarah and the man, James, were damning. Casual exchanges, full of intimacy and words that had no place in a marriage. But it wasn't just the texts. I scrolled through their history, my stomach sinking with each line I read. They spoke about meeting up at parties, late-night conversations, and promises to catch up, in ways that only lovers did. The lies, the manipulation, it was all there, laid out in front of me. I couldn't stop scrolling. My mind raced, unable to fully comprehend what I was reading. Had she been seeing him for weeks? Was this affair deeper than just one reckless mistake? The more I read, the clearer it became. She had been planning this for some time, building up to something I had never seen coming. But I needed more. The texts weren't enough, those could be brushed off, denied. I needed something physical, something that would leave no room for her to wiggle out of the truth. I grabbed her phone and headed to the bedroom. Her movements were still slow, the soft rise and fall of her breathing giving me the moment I needed. I opened the drawer where she kept her personal items, her diaries, random mementos, and hidden trinkets from years past. There it was. A letter. Folded neatly, waiting for me. I felt sick just touching it. But I had to. Unfolding the letter slowly, I scanned the words. It was from James. My heart stopped when I read it. The letter detailed their entire plan. The trip to the hotel on New Year's Day. The secret rendezvous, the promises of what would come next. They were planning a future together. Not just a fling, not just an affair. They were planning to leave me. I staggered back against the wall, the letter still in my hands. The world was spinning. The very woman I had trusted to share my life with, to raise our daughter, had already planned her exit. I wasn't just another chapter in her life. I was the thing holding her back from her true happiness. I sank into the chair, the letter crumpled in my fist. The room felt smaller, suffocating. When Sarah stirred in the bed, I knew the time had come. She didn't know I had found everything. She didn't know that I had her entire betrayal in my hands. And when she walked into that living room, she wouldn't be the woman who had a future with me. She would be the woman who had just destroyed it. I took a deep breath, collected my thoughts, and walked to the bedroom door. Sarah was still rubbing the sleep from her eyes when I called out to her. "We need to talk." Her eyes fluttered open, and the confusion was immediate. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to steady herself as she got out of bed. "Is everything okay?" I looked at her, the woman who had broken my heart, the woman I had once thought would be my partner in every way. She was so calm, so unaware of the storm coming. And it disgusted me. "I know about James," I said flatly. Her face drained of color, the blood draining from her cheeks. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. "I know everything. The texts. The hotel reservation. The plans you've made with him. Don't try to deny it." Sarah's eyes filled with panic. She took a step back. I can explain," she stammered. "It's not what you think." I let out a bitter laugh. "Really? Then what is it, Sarah? Because I've been sitting here, thinking of how to understand what you've done to me. But I'm failing. I'm failing to understand why you'd destroy everything we've worked for." She was silent now, her hands trembling as she avoided my gaze. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way," she whispered. "How did you mean for it to happen then?" I shot back, my voice cold and sharp. "Did you mean for me to find out this way? Were you hoping I wouldn't notice? That's the plan, right? Keep everything hidden until it's too late for me to fight back?" Her breath caught, and she shook her head, tears spilling from her eyes. "I was lonely," she said, her voice breaking. You were always working. I thought maybe if I found someone who could make me feel loved again, I could forget about the emptiness. I felt a chill run through me. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a lie I had never seen coming. You were lonely, so you cheated on me? You destroyed our family because you were lonely? Ryan, please, I never meant to hurt you, she begged, her voice barely above a whisper. It just happened. I never wanted this to go this far. Too late, I said coldly. You've gone too far. I was shaking with anger, but I couldn't afford to let it overwhelm me. I had spent my life trying to be patient, to be understanding, but I couldn't allow her to manipulate me anymore. You've ruined everything, I said. And now it's my turn. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the letter, and handed it to her. I know everything, Sarah. This is over. She took the letter, her hands trembling as she read the words. Her face crumpled, and she let out a low sob. Please, Ryan. I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. I didn't mean to. You made your choice, I said firmly. And now, I'm making mine. I stood up, my mind made up. This marriage is over. We're done. The room was silent except for her sobs as she crumpled into herself, unable to hold the weight of her betrayal. I walked out of the room, not looking back. I knew she would try to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, but the truth was clear now. There was no going back. Not after this. The storm had hit. And nothing would ever be the same. The days that followed were a blur of tension and chaos. Sarah had tried to reach out, calling, texting, even emailing. I ignored everything. She didn't deserve a response. Her apologies felt empty, forced, just another part of the same manipulative game she had been playing. I couldn't allow myself to fall for it again. Our home, once a sanctuary, felt like a battlefield. Every room echoed with the weight of her betrayal. The silence between us was suffocating. We didn't speak, not really. She stayed mostly in the guest room, retreating from the storm she had created, while I immersed myself in work to escape the suffocating pressure. Emily, our daughter, had no idea what was happening. I couldn't bring myself to tell her yet. She noticed the distance. Emily was sharp for her age, too sharp for me to hide my pain from her. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, she quietly approached me, her expression a mix of concern and confusion. Dad, she asked softly, her voice small, why isn't Mom here with us anymore? I froze. My heart twisted. I didn't know what to say. How could I explain this to her? How could I tell my daughter that her mother, the woman who had always been her rock, had torn our family apart with lies and deceit? I forced a smile, my voice thick with emotion. Mommy, and I need some time apart, I said, keeping my tone as calm as possible. But no matter what, we both love you very much. Okay? Emily nodded slowly, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. She wasn't a little kid anymore. She could sense the cracks in our family, even if she didn't fully understand them. As the days passed, the tension continued to mount. I tried to maintain some sense of normalcy, but the truth loomed over every interaction with Sarah. She would try to apologize, but I couldn't listen. Every word felt like a manipulation, a desperate attempt to claw her way back into my life. I wasn't falling for it anymore. But I wasn't done yet. I wasn't just going to let her walk away from this, pretending it never happened. I had a plan. I spent the next few days making calls, gathering evidence, and preparing for what was to come. I wasn't going to give Sarah the chance to rewrite the narrative. The lies had to be exposed, completely, thoroughly, and without mercy. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything I had worked for, everything we had built, and just walk away unscathed. The lawyer was the first step. Claire was a no-nonsense professional who had worked with friends in the past, and I trusted her completely. When I explained the situation to her, she listened carefully, asking all the right questions. You've got a solid case for divorce, she said after a long pause. Infidelity is one thing, but involving your child in the deception, that's a game changer. My mind raced with the implications. Sarah's affair wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. She had dragged Emily into it, lying to her and making her complicit in the secret. That was unforgivable. Get the evidence, Claire advised. The more you have, the better. We'll make sure she can't get away with this. That night, I went through everything. The messages between Sarah and James. The hotel reservation. The lies she had told me. I wasn't just documenting her infidelity. I was documenting the destruction she had caused. But it wasn't enough. I needed to hit harder. Sarah had to feel the full weight of her actions. I wasn't going to let her hide behind a flimsy apology. That's when I made the decision. It was time to go after James. I tracked him down. It wasn't hard. Sarah had mentioned him too many times for him to be a stranger. He was an ex from before our marriage, a man who had no place in our lives anymore. But he was the one who had been with her in the first place. He had to know that I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I arranged a meeting. It wasn't the kind of meeting you have over coffee with an old friend. It was a confrontation, a reckoning. The day of the meeting, I dressed carefully. I didn't want to look angry, even though I was. I didn't want to let my emotions take control. I had a point to prove, and I was going to prove it, no matter what. I showed up early, just in case. The coffee shop was quiet, the perfect place to have a private conversation. I saw him when he walked in, James, looking unsure of himself. He had that cocky, self-assured air about him, but it didn't take long to see the nervous tension in his shoulders. He knew this wasn't going to be a casual chat. "Ryan," he said, sitting down across from me. "I didn't expect this." "You should have," I replied flatly. "You're the reason everything fell apart." James shifted uncomfortably, looking around the room as if he wanted to escape. "Look, I never meant for any of this to happen," he said, his voice betraying a hint of guilt. "She told me things weren't good between you two. She said she was lonely. Don't you dare blame me for your actions," I snapped. "You knew she was married. You knew she had a family. But you didn't care, did you?" James swallowed hard, looking away. "No, I didn't care," he admitted. "I should have, but I didn't. I thought it was a one-time thing. But then she said she wanted more. She made me think we could be together." "More?" I asked incredulously. "You were her escape. That's all. You were just a way for her to avoid facing the life she had destroyed. But now you're both going to pay the price." James looked visibly shaken, his cocky exterior fading. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "I didn't know it would get this far. I never meant to hurt anyone." "Save it," I cut him off, pulling out my phone. "I've got everything I need." The footage I'd gathered, the messages, the hotel reservations, everything was enough. It wasn't just a matter of exposing Sarah now. It was about making sure James knew that his actions had consequences, too. "I'm sending all of this to your employer," I said, my voice cold. "They should know about the kind of man they've got working for them." James paled, his mouth opening and closing as he tried to formulate an excuse, but there was none. "This ends now," I told him firmly. "You stay away from my family. You stay away from me. If I ever hear your name again, I'll make sure you regret it." I stood up, leaving him behind, knowing he had just been served the final dose of reality. This wasn't a game anymore. This was my life, and I wasn't going to let him or Sarah ruin it any longer. When I returned home, Sarah was waiting. I could feel the desperation in her eyes even before she spoke. "Ryan, please," she begged. "Please, we can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm so sorry." But I didn't respond. I wasn't going to listen anymore. "Do whatever you want," I said, my voice steady and cold. "But this marriage is over. There's nothing left to fix." And in that moment I knew I had taken control. I had exposed the lies, the manipulation, and the betrayal. But more importantly, I had decided to move on. To take back what was mine. Sarah might have destroyed our marriage, but I wasn't going to let her destroy me. Not anymore. The divorce process began almost immediately. I had already made up my mind. There was no going back. The paperwork was filed, and I met with my lawyer, Claire, as frequently as I could. Every time I walked into her office, I felt a new sense of resolve. The evidence was overwhelming, and we were moving forward with everything I had gathered. I was ready for the battle ahead. I wasn't going to let Sarah have a chance to manipulate the situation in her favor. The days following my confrontation with James were quiet. Sarah tried again and again to reach me. She sent texts, left voicemails, even wrote letters. But I ignored everything. There was nothing she could say that would change my mind now. I had been broken, betrayed in ways I didn't even know were possible. She could apologize 1,000 times, and it wouldn't make a difference. I focused on Emily. She was the only one who mattered now. The hurt in her eyes when she realized her mother was no longer living with us had been almost too much to bear. I did my best to shield her from the ugliness of the situation, but I knew that wouldn't last forever. One evening, as I tucked her into bed, Emily turned to me with wide, serious eyes. "Daddy," she said softly, "why doesn't Mommy live with us anymore?" Her words felt like a punch to the gut. I had known this day would come, the day when I couldn't hide the truth from her anymore. She was perceptive, too smart to be kept in the dark. But I couldn't bring myself to tell her everything. How could I? How could I explain the betrayal, the lies, the heartbreak? "She made some bad choices," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But I'm here, and I always will be. I love you, Emily, and nothing will change that." She seemed to accept my answer, nodding slowly, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "I love you too, Daddy," she said quietly, hugging me tightly. "But I miss her." The words broke me. As much as I wanted to protect her from this pain, I knew I couldn't shield her forever. The hurt was too deep, the damage too lasting. But I also knew that as long as I was here, she would never feel abandoned. Not by me. Over the next few weeks, the reality of the situation set in. Sarah and I didn't speak unless it was absolutely necessary. I had moved on emotionally long before I had filed for divorce, but now the legal steps were underway. I wasn't just fighting for custody of Emily. I was fighting for my own peace of mind. And it wasn't just Sarah that I had to deal with. James, too, remained a lingering threat. He had tried to get in touch once more, this time through an email. It was full of excuses and regret, but it didn't matter. He had made his choice, and so had I. I wasn't interested in hearing about his feelings. As the divorce progressed, it became clear that Sarah wasn't going to give up easily. She fought for visitation rights with Emily, citing her role as a mother and claiming that her actions, however misguided, shouldn't determine her ability to parent. It was a desperate move, but I knew what I had to do. I gathered every shred of evidence. The texts, the letters, the photos from the hotel, all of it. I gave everything to Claire, telling her to prepare for a battle. I wasn't going to let Sarah walk away from this unscathed, not when she had done this to our family. The day of the custody hearing arrived, and my stomach churned. I had been prepared for this moment, but that didn't make it any easier. I had no idea what to expect from Sarah, what she might say to try to manipulate the court into giving her some semblance of a chance. When the proceedings began, Sarah and her lawyer were already sitting at the table, looking tense but composed. I could see her eyes darting to me, full of a mixture of regret and guilt, but I wasn't fooled anymore. She stood when it was her turn to speak, her voice shaky as she addressed the judge. "Your Honor, I made a terrible mistake," she began. "I understand the hurt I've caused, and I deeply regret my actions. But I am still Emily's mother. I love her more than anything. I want to be there for her, to continue being a part of her life." I wanted to scream at her. The audacity, the nerve to stand there and pretend she hadn't destroyed everything. But I held my tongue. The truth would speak for itself. When it was my turn to speak, I stood and faced the judge. I spoke calmly, but the anger that simmered beneath the surface was impossible to hide. "I understand Sarah's desire to be a part of Emily's life," I said. But her actions have shown me that she cannot be trusted. She's been dishonest and cruel, and she has placed Emily in the middle of all this. I cannot, in good conscience, allow her to continue to have unsupervised visitation. Not until she takes full responsibility for what she's done. I turned to Sarah, my eyes narrowing. You betrayed our family, Sarah. You don't get to undo that with empty words and promises. Emily deserves better. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. She had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. The judge asked a few more questions, but I knew the decision was already made. When the ruling came, I was granted full custody of Emily. Sarah was given limited supervised visitation, but only after she completed a mandatory parenting course and therapy sessions. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The battle was over, and I had won. But the victory felt hollow. I had protected my daughter, yes, but the cost had been too great. The woman I had once loved, the mother of my child, was no longer part of our life in the way she used to be. As we left the courthouse, I held Emily's hand, trying to offer her some comfort. She was quiet, lost in her own thoughts, but I could tell she was relieved. The uncertainty, the pain, had finally been put to rest. The next few days passed in a blur. I focused on Emily, on keeping things as normal as possible. We started new routines, movie nights, weekend trips to the park, even cooking dinner together. It was small, simple, but it was ours. And for the first time in months, I felt like we were starting to heal. Sarah still tried to reach out. She sent letters, messages, even gifts for Emily, but I ignored them all. There was nothing left to say. She had lost me. She had lost everything that mattered. But as time passed, I began to wonder if, in some small part of my heart, I could forgive her. Not for her sake, but for mine. For Emily's sake. I knew the answer would come in time. But for now, I was content to focus on the present. Emily and I, rebuilding our lives, one day at a time. And as we moved forward, I promised myself something. I would never allow someone to tear apart my family again. I would never let someone like Sarah, someone who had proven they couldn't be trusted, destroy everything I had worked so hard to protect. It wasn't just about vengeance anymore. It was about protecting what mattered most. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my life again. The weeks following the custody hearing were a strange mixture of relief and uncertainty. I had fought for Emily, for the stability she deserved, and I had won, but something felt off. It wasn't just the absence of Sarah, which, if I were being honest, still weighed on me. It was the lingering uncertainty, the feeling that the peace we had fought for was too fragile to last. The days began to fall into a routine, but I noticed the cracks starting to show. Emily was adjusting, but I could tell she was still carrying a weight I couldn't quite lift. She seemed quieter than usual, more withdrawn, especially when it came to talking about Sarah. I knew she missed her mother, despite everything that had happened. How could she not? Sarah had been her constant for so many years, and now she was just gone. I did my best to provide the stability she needed. I took extra care with her homework, made sure we spent our evenings together, and encouraged her to talk about her feelings, even if she only wanted to vent about school or friends. But there were nights when she would look at me with those big, sad eyes, and I knew she was thinking about Sarah. It was hard to navigate those moments, but I tried not to show her my own struggles. I didn't want her to feel responsible for my pain. My emotions had to be set aside for her sake. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about making sure she felt safe, loved, and accepted in her new reality. I hadn't heard from Sarah in a few weeks. She had been complying with the court's visitation orders, coming to see Emily only under the supervision of a third party. I kept my distance, but I knew that wasn't going to last forever. Sarah had a way of worming her way back into people's lives when she wanted something. And part of me feared that she might try to do that again, that she might try to manipulate Emily into letting her back into her life. But I wasn't going to let that happen. Not again. It was a Saturday morning when I got the call. The voice on the other end was familiar, and for a moment, I thought I might have misheard it. Ryan? I froze. It was Sarah. My heart skipped a beat. What was she doing calling me? Sarah, I said cautiously. What do you want? There was a long pause, and when she spoke, her voice was quiet, almost pleading. I need to talk to you. Please, just hear me out. I felt a flicker of anger, but I kept my voice steady. There's nothing left to say, Sarah. I've already made it clear, this marriage is over. I know, but I need to see Emily, she said, the words dripping with desperation. I've been doing everything the court asked. I've completed the parenting classes, I've been in therapy. I want to make things right. I need to talk to her. Please. I could feel my temper rising. The nerve of her, asking for something she hadn't earned. She had lost the right to see Emily when she chose to destroy our family. She had no place in our lives anymore. Sarah, don't do this, I said, my voice icy. You don't get to come back and pretend like everything's fine. You've broken my trust, and you've hurt Emily in ways you'll never understand. You don't get to just waltz back into her life. I'm sorry, Ryan, she said, her voice breaking. I've made so many mistakes. But I love her. I'm her mother. I want to fix this. Please, I'm begging you. I shook my head, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. It's too late for apologies, Sarah. You're not going to fix anything. You've done enough damage. There was silence on the other end for a long moment. I could hear her breathing, but she didn't speak. Finally, she said, I'll respect your decision, but please, just remember that I'm trying. I love Emily. I just need a chance. I'm not giving you a chance, I replied firmly. You've had plenty of chances. You blew it. And with that, I hung up. I stood in the kitchen for a few moments, trying to calm my racing heart. It felt like the entire weight of everything had come crashing back in that moment. The anger, the betrayal, the resentment, all of it rushing back to the surface. I couldn't let her get to me, though. I couldn't let Sarah manipulate me, not again. I had to stay strong, for Emily's sake. She needed me to be her rock, and I couldn't waver now. Not when things were starting to settle, not when we were starting to rebuild. The rest of the day was quiet. Emily was out with a friend, and I took the time to process everything that had just happened. Sarah wasn't going to stop. She wasn't going to just fade into the background. As much as I wanted to believe that this was the end of it, I knew deep down that it wasn't. This was just the beginning. The phone rang again later that evening, but this time, I didn't even look at the caller ID. I knew who it was. Sarah. I let it go to voicemail. It was only a few minutes before I felt the overwhelming urge to listen to the message. I walked to the other room, my fingers trembling as I pressed play. Ryan, it's me again, her voice said, softer this time. I'm sorry for pushing. I know I don't have the right to ask anything from you. But I need to see her. I don't know how to fix this, but I need to try. For her. Please, just give me a chance to talk to you. The message ended, and I stared at the screen. She was desperate. I could hear it in her voice. But no matter how many times she begged, no matter how many apologies she gave, I couldn't give her that chance. Not now. Not after everything. I deleted the voicemail and turned off the phone. The next few days passed in a haze. Sarah didn't stop trying to reach out, but I didn't respond. Emily was still adjusting to the new way of things, and I was doing my best to help her through it. It wasn't easy. One night, as we were having dinner, Emily looked up at me with a furrowed brow. Dad, do you think Mom's ever going to come back? The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. I set my fork down and took a deep breath before answering her. I don't know, sweetheart. I can't promise anything. But what I can promise is that you and we're going to be okay. I'm always going to be here for you. She nodded slowly, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. I knew it wasn't enough to fully ease the pain, but it was all I could offer her for now. The truth was, I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't consumed by the anger or the betrayal. I was focused on what mattered, on protecting Emily, on making sure she felt loved and safe, no matter what happened next. Because, for her, I would fight until the very end. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of Sarah's absence, combined with her persistent attempts to re-enter our lives, lingered like an unresolved storm on the horizon. I couldn't deny that the emotional toll it was taking on me was significant. Every time the phone rang or a message buzzed on my screen, my gut twisted, expecting another plea from Sarah. And every time, I let it go, letting it fall into the void where the things she said no longer mattered. It was a Saturday when it all seemed to come to a head. Emily and I were spending the day at the park, enjoying a rare moment of peace. The sun was out, the air crisp, and for the first time in a while, I felt like things were as close to normal as they could get. Emily ran ahead, her laughter echoing through the playground as she played with other kids, and I couldn't help but smile. But then my phone buzzed again, and just like that, everything shifted. I glanced at the screen, my pulse quickening. It was a text from Sarah. "Please, Ryan. I need to see her. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. I've changed. Please don't keep us apart. I'm begging you." It took everything in me not to throw the phone in frustration. This was becoming a sick cycle. The desperation, the pleading, the empty promises. Sarah had hurt me more than I thought possible, and yet here she was, trying to worm her way back into my life. Into Emily's life. I gripped the phone tighter, my fingers aching with the weight of the decision I had to make. I knew what the right thing was. I had to protect Emily. I had to protect us. But as much as I told myself that, the reality of cutting Sarah out of our lives completely felt harder than I could admit. I stood there for a few moments, torn between doing what was right and the part of me that, despite everything, still cared about the woman I had once loved. I took a deep breath, and before I could second-guess myself, I typed out a response. "No, Sarah. It's over. You've made your choices. You lost your chance." I pressed send before I could think too much about it. But the moment the message was delivered, I felt a strange calm wash over me. It wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do. I turned off the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. When I looked up, Emily was sitting on the bench, her legs dangling, looking over at me curiously. "You okay, Dad?" she asked quietly. I smiled, trying to hide the lingering heaviness in my chest. "Yeah, sweetheart. I'm fine. Let's go get some ice cream, huh?" She smiled, and just like that, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I wasn't going to let this fight consume me anymore. I had made my choice. Now I was going to focus on what mattered. The following days passed without incident. There were still some uneasy moments, of course. Emily was still processing everything that had happened, and I knew there would be more tough conversations ahead. But for now, the silence from Sarah was a relief. But nothing lasts forever. It was late one night when my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't a message from Sarah, it was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me hesitate. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Ryan, it's Claire." My lawyer's voice came through, sharp and professional, but there was an edge to it that caught my attention. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice tense. "I just got off the phone with Sarah's lawyer," Claire said. "She's taking you to court. She wants full custody." I froze. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been expecting it on some level. Of course she would fight. She wasn't just going to let go of her daughter without a fight. But hearing it out loud, hearing the finality of it, felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me. "She's going to fight for full custody?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," Claire confirmed. "She's claiming that you're unfit to raise Emily, and she's going after your character. It's going to get ugly, Ryan. She's got a few things up her sleeve. You need to be ready." I felt a cold knot form in the pit of my stomach. Sarah had always been manipulative, but this was something else entirely. "Do we have a chance?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Claire hesitated for a moment. It's going to be a tough case. But you've got the evidence on your side. You've been a good father to Emily, and you've shown consistency. Still, with Sarah's lawyer throwing everything they can at you, it's going to be a battle. I let out a long breath. I'm ready for whatever comes. The next few weeks were filled with endless paperwork, court dates, and meetings with Claire. I wasn't going to back down. I was going to fight for Emily. This wasn't just about proving Sarah wrong. This was about protecting my daughter from the woman who had hurt us both so deeply. But the strain of the upcoming battle started to wear on me. Emily could feel it, too. Her silence became more noticeable, her mood more erratic. I caught her sitting in her room late one evening, her back to me as I knocked on the door. "Em, you all right?" I asked gently. She didn't respond at first. Then, slowly, she turned around. Do you think things will ever get better?" Her voice trembled, and I could see the vulnerability in her eyes. I stepped into her room, sitting on the edge of her bed. "I don't know, sweetie. But I can promise you that I'll do everything I can to make sure we're okay. No matter what." "I miss her, Dad," Emily said quietly, her voice barely audible. "I don't know why she did what she did, but I miss her. I just want everything to be like it was." I held her hand, my heart breaking. "I know you do. I miss the way things were, too. But sometimes people make mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes mean we have to make hard choices. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this, but I promise you, you're not alone. I'll always be here." Tears welled in her eyes, and she threw herself into my arms. I held her close, not knowing how to make this better. How could I? How could I undo the damage Sarah had done? "I love you, Daddy," she whispered into my chest. "I love you too, sweetheart," I said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. And in that moment, I realized something. I might not be able to change the past, and I might not have control over the future. But for the first time in a long time, I knew that as long as I had Emily, we would be okay. We'd rebuild, piece by piece, and we'd make it through the storm together. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be more battles to fight, more heartache to endure. But with Emily by my side, I was ready to face whatever came our way. I would never stop fighting for her. Not for a second. And Sarah? She could try all she wanted, but she would never win. I would make sure of it. The following weeks became a strange balancing act. Every day, I found myself more and more entrenched in the routine I was trying to create with Emily, even as the shadows of Sarah's betrayal loomed just out of sight. There were moments, fleeting seconds, when I almost believed we could move on without a hitch, like everything would just fall into place. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something I wasn't prepared for. Emily was adjusting. Slowly, but surely. She had her good days, laughing at a joke or coming home from school with stories about her friends, but the bad days were harder to navigate. She'd withdraw, her eyes growing distant when she thought I wasn't watching. And sometimes, when she thought I was asleep, I'd hear her cry softly into her pillow. It broke my heart. But I couldn't show her that. Not now. She needed stability, and I couldn't let myself crack under the weight of everything that had happened. I had to be strong for her. I had to prove to her that no matter how broken our family had been, I would always be there, no matter what. One evening, after dinner, Emily surprised me. We were sitting on the couch together, flipping through the TV channels, when she turned to me out of nowhere. "Dad," she said quietly, "I miss Mom." I froze, the words cutting through the calm like a knife. I swallowed hard, but I didn't let the sorrow show on my face. "I know you do, honey," I replied softly, placing a hand on hers. "I miss her too. But she made some bad choices, and we can't change that." "But why did she leave?" "I don't understand." Her voice cracked, and my heart broke for her. "I don't understand why she doesn't want to be with us." I pulled her close, wrapping her in a hug. She cried softly, her small body trembling against mine. It took everything in me not to lose it, not to let my emotions spill out. But I couldn't break now, not for her sake. Sometimes, people make mistakes, Emily. I whispered, trying to steady my breath. But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. She's just lost right now. And I'm here. And I always will be. She nodded, her sobs quieting, but I could feel the weight of her confusion, her heartache, hanging in the air between us. Do you think she'll come back? She asked, her voice small and hopeful. I don't know, I said, my throat tight. I really don't. I knew the answer was more complicated than she could understand. I knew that Sarah had made her choices, and there was no going back from what she had done. But Emily didn't deserve that truth, not yet. The days after that conversation felt heavier than before. Every moment, every glance, every time I watched Emily struggle with the idea of a broken home, it stung. But I did my best to shield her from the worst of it. I kept us busy. We worked on art projects, I helped her with schoolwork, and we spent weekends at the park, trying to distract ourselves from the painful reality we both knew too well. But despite the moments of calm, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Sarah wasn't done yet. She was still trying to reach out, still sending letters, emails, even attempting to contact me through mutual acquaintances. But I wouldn't give in. I wouldn't let her worm her way back into our lives. Not after everything. That is, until the day she showed up at our front door. I had been sitting at the kitchen table, going over some paperwork when I heard the knock. I froze. It wasn't a casual knock, it was sharp, deliberate, like a demand. I stood up, my heart racing. I already knew who it was. I walked to the door, hesitated for a moment, then opened it. There she was, Sarah, standing on the doorstep. She looked different. Tired, worn. Her eyes were puffy from crying, her face pale, but there was something in her demeanor that told me she wasn't here to beg for my forgiveness. Not completely, at least. She had a plan. Ryan, she said quietly, her voice hoarse. Can we talk? I didn't answer immediately. I stared at her, trying to contain the anger that bubbled just beneath the surface. How could she stand there, acting like nothing had happened? How could she pretend she hadn't broken everything? I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. What do you want, Sarah? She seemed to hesitate for a moment, then stepped forward. I need to talk to Emily, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I know you don't trust me. And I know I've done things that I can't take back. But I need to make things right with her. She deserves to hear it from me. My stomach twisted in disbelief. You think after everything, you get to just waltz back in and see her? I'm not asking to come back into your life, Ryan, she said softly. I'm asking to be a mother to Emily again. I've been doing the work. I'm not asking for forgiveness, not yet. But I need her to know I'm still here. I still care about her. I shook my head, the words burning in my chest. You don't get to make demands. You lost that right when you tore our family apart. You don't get to just show up and act like nothing happened. She lowered her head, her eyes filling with tears. I know, she whispered. But she needs to know I love her. I'm sorry for everything. I'll do whatever it takes to prove it to her. Please, Ryan. Please let me see her. I wanted to say no. I wanted to slam the door in her face and tell her she didn't deserve anything, especially not a chance to hurt Emily again. But as I looked at her, broken, desperate, I realized that I had to do what was best for Emily, not what was easiest for me. Fine, I said, my voice cold. But this is the last time, Sarah. You get one shot at this. If you mess it up, I'm done. Understand? She nodded, relief washing over her face. I understand. Thank you, Ryan. I stepped aside, allowing her to enter. But I couldn't shake the unease that settled in my stomach. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. When Emily came home that afternoon, I sat her down. She looked at me, sensing that something was different. Sweetheart, I said gently, your mom came by today. Her face froze. Mom? What did she want? She wants to talk to you, I said softly. She wants to explain things. To try to make it right. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. I could see the conflict swirling inside her. Her heart wanted to believe Sarah, but her head, her mind, knew better. I don't want to see her, Dad, Emily whispered. I nodded, holding her close. I know, baby. I know. But sometimes, people do things they regret. And she needs to show you that she's trying to make up for it. But you don't have to accept it. You don't have to forgive her right away. Emily looked up at me, her eyes filled with confusion and pain. I don't know what to do, Dad. I'm so mad at her, but I still love her. I know, sweetheart, I said softly, brushing her hair back. It's okay to feel that way. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just take your time. I'm here for you, no matter what. The evening dragged on, and I couldn't help but worry about what was going to happen next. Would Sarah truly change? Or was this just another attempt to win back her own guilt-ridden conscience? The answer, I realized, was simple. It didn't matter. Because no matter what, I was the one who would always be here for Emily. And that would never change. The day Sarah arrived for her supervised visit with Emily, the air in the house was thick with anticipation. Emily had been quiet all morning, her usual enthusiasm replaced by an unsettling calm. I could tell she was nervous. I was too. I stayed in the living room while Sarah and Emily spoke privately in the next room, under the watchful eye of the court-appointed mediator. I didn't need to hear their words, but I could hear the slight tremor in Sarah's voice through the walls. She was trying. I knew that much. But whether it was enough, whether Emily could forgive her, remained to be seen. When they returned, Emily's face was unreadable. She didn't look angry or sad, just tired. How did it go? I asked gently. Emily shrugged, avoiding my gaze. I don't know, Dad. She said a lot of stuff, but I'm not sure I believe her. I nodded, understanding exactly how she felt. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight, not after everything Sarah had done. Do you want to talk about it? I asked, keeping my voice steady. I don't know, she said softly. Maybe later. I didn't push her. I couldn't force her to feel anything she wasn't ready for. As Sarah left, she gave me a long, searching look, like she was waiting for some sign that this might be the beginning of something better. I didn't give it to her. Instead, I turned and led Emily to the kitchen for a snack, choosing to focus on what mattered. Right now, Emily needed me, and that's all that I could give her. The weeks passed in a blur of good days and bad days. Emily and I settled into a rhythm that felt familiar, though the shadow of Sarah's presence never quite left. Every now and then, I would hear Emily talking quietly to herself, her words full of questions I couldn't answer. Dad, she asked one night, as we sat together on the couch watching a movie, do you think Mom will ever come back for good? I hesitated, unsure how to answer. I don't know, sweetie. But I do know this, you don't need to worry about that. You have me. And no matter what happens with your mom, I'll always be here for you. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with hope, though it didn't quite reach her heart. I know, she said softly. I just wish things were different. Me too, kiddo. Me too. And so, we kept moving forward, one day at a time. The future was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure, as long as Emily had me, she would never be alone. And that was enough for now.